Hey there, guys. Sorry, a little late. No, actually, 6:30, right? Hey, I'm up here in Duluth, Minnesota. I'm at my friend's house, and we're going to be heading to the Grand Marais plein air event. And so I did a little setup here. And today's beer is I just went out and saw that I could Leinenkugel, which is a canoe paddle Kolsch. I'm not sure. We'll see. Let's see what it tastes like. And I'll give us a rating because last week I didn't have anything. And so this week I made sure before I got here that I had something. There was not much to choose from, but hey, I never had this before. It's a Kugel's Canoe Paddle Kolsch. So let's see. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Wow, that's actually very good. I'm going to give that a 10. It's very good. Not bad at all. Cheers. Cheers, everybody. So we're doing a waterfall today, and we're going to blur the background. And so I didn't do it this afternoon. I didn't have class because I am, again, like I said, I'm in Duluth, Minnesota. Boy, my glasses are really crooked, aren't they? And we're going to be doing this for the first time. So you guys are my guinea pigs this week. I don't have a class. I haven't had a class when I'm up here in Duluth. And tomorrow I'm heading to Grand Marais. It's where I do the plein air event. And so here, let's go and see who's all here. Let me just put this over to the side here. I still can read, but it's kind of far away. So hi from Sheboygan. Hey, Abby, Marianne, Darcy, Kathy, Dave, Monica, Pamela, Sue, and Pat, and who's else on here? Barbara and Pamela. Well, there's even some questions, I think. I mean, they're kind of far away. So let me just see if I can read them. A limey beer has always been a favorite of mine. Oh, thanks, Barbara. It's actually very good. It's a very good one. They have a lot of flavors right now, and so I just picked this one. Thanks a lot for mentioning my name to Holbein. That's also awesome. All right, let's get going here, guys. And so let's see. Hopefully this is running really well and smooth. My website, always BeckerArt.net or davidarbecker.com. But if you ever use my name and ever put it into the Google search, always make sure you have my middle initial R. R. And so my materials, of course, are Holbein. And thank you, Pamela, for mentioning my name to Holbein. And we had the brushes, and we're doing the Stonehenge paper today. And here's our value study. And if you read my newsletter, it was all about blurring things, right? And so I'm going to make that part of this is how to blur things and how to take and blur areas to get them away from being the part of the center of interest and pushing them to the distance. And that one thing will be the trees. And so these trees back here, they're my lights. I consider this part of my light area. This is a middle tone that's in my light. So the pattern, the value pattern, again, between my black and white, this is, yes, a gray and middle tone, but I'm pushing it to the back. And I'm going to make that, I know it's bright red and it's bright yellows, and that's fine. But because the value pattern has nothing to do with the dimension, that's the colors and stuff and the dimensions part, that doesn't have anything to do with the value pattern, the black and white pattern, right? Because this is the light area and it's sort of like yin yang because the light up here has dark on top of it, and this is the dark behind where the white is here. So it's kind of like reversed. The big area of light with the dark on it, with this is the big area of dark with the light on it. And of course, the value or the main center of interest is my waterfall. Make it simple again for yourself. Make it black and white. That's how come we discussed it so much in the last couple of weeks, is because I use it for everything I do. And now we're talking about blurring and it's going to be blurred, but we can talk about color some other time. We're not going to talk about that right now, but this is going to be a warm background. So that's usually in dimension is not a good thing because that doesn't push it back. But by blurring this back there, I'm gonna make it into a soft edge and blurry and kind of this light too. It can be bright with color, but I'm gonna push it back. So any questions, just let me know. Put them up there and I'll have to squint at them and see see you. All right, let's get into our tabletop and just get going here. So I set this up and it's a makeshift, so it's not like my every week things, but close, not too bad. And the lighting is, a little thing I have for my, which I actually forgot last night because I was out plein air painting last night, and I forgot it, and so I had to come in early because I didn't have that with me. Let me just clean this palette up a little bit here. And so what I'm going to show you is that I just a lot of times I go to like TJ Maxx or Marshalls, and I buy these little towels, and I think they had a package of 10 of them or 12 of them, a package of 12 of them, and they're great for outdoor painting. Instead of using paper towel, it's just so easy to wash these in later and then just use them again. And I bought about 10 of them for like $7. It's like, less than $1 a piece, and you can have a really nice hefty, with the paper towel, you just go through so fast and it doesn't really clean as well as a towel does. All right. And so that's it going with our lights. And since if you look at the picture right here, let me get these brushes out of the way so you can kind of see them. So this picture right here, what I want to do is I want to keep the sky white, but I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow tone into it because I want the warm background to be warm. And if I made it a blue sky, it just would be so different a color from everything else that I'm gonna be using. I'm gonna be using the reds and greens, the red of the background and the yellow and purple. So yellow, green, red, purple type of combination. If I go in there with the blue orange, then I've got all the combinations. And so I'm going to keep it to where I have a little bit more of a yellow sky. And it is basically a white sky, so why not just go with that anyways? And let's get going here. And then everybody always asks me why I'm wearing black gloves, but watch this. See, when you put it in the camera, it usually lightens up my area because now it has something to contrast against. See how it lightens it up, and I take it away, and that's what I have at home. This it really is, you can really see it really happening. Where when on my setup at home, in my studio, it's not that intense, but as you can see, it just gives it something to focus on because everything's light, it doesn't work as well. Okay, so let's get going here. I'll take a little bit of white and yellow. I use white with my yellow to dull it down a little bit and make it not quite as vibrant. And I can also wet it up here. I'm just going to make a very, very light yellow. And I'm going to go right through the trees here. And I probably should have taken my eraser and like rolled it over there because this line got pretty dark, and I don't like to have it that dark. And oh my gosh, it's going to reflect. You got to put it up like this. Let's see what I can put underneath there. I'll put my water underneath there so it doesn't reflect the light. Forgot about that. And so I wet it, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. And again, ask questions anytime you want. Clean palette, yeah. You can see my palette later on this week when I'm painting every day outside. You're gonna be amazed at how dirty it's gonna be. So there's a little bit of yellow. And I put my thing so I can rub it here. I didn't have a towel put over here. I forgot to bring one with, though I should have just bought one of those too. And so now I'm gonna take my round brush. I know it's a big area, and what I'm gonna do is take my round brush and make my orange and red trees back there. I'm not gonna make them quite as dark or as vibrant as they are in the picture. Let's push this aside here a little bit. And I'm going to use thick amount of pigment because it's really wet right now. And so if I'll take like my orange here. Ooh, almost in my beer. My beer's over there. It's like I better watch it. So I'm going to take a little bit of brilliant orange, a little bit of the other orange. This is my brilliant orange. That's red, actually. That's red. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here with thick pigment, get the water out of my brush because look at there's so much water here. It's just going to bleed all over the place. So I got to make it kind of thick. I got to make the pigment thick so it doesn't bleed too far. I'm going to make this a pine tree. And I know that pine trees they don't get red like this, but I'm going to make it that way. Maybe put a little bit of orange. What I'll do is put a little bit of green in there, a little bit of quinacridone gold, Q gold they call it. I'll put a little bit of that in there, so that and with a little bit of blue, that'll make it a little bit green. Pine trees do not get super red and orange unless they're dying. And so we'll just put a little pine tree right there. Soft edged, soft edged. Now I'll make the other parts nice and red. I can make these parts red. And if you want to get a certain kind of texture, go for it. You know, if you want a certain type of texture that you want to put into the picture. That's a wet wash, you know, type of wash that you want to get. Take a little bit of yellow. I'm going to go right into the rock. You know, I know the rock's gonna be darker. Actually, no, the rock up here is not gonna be darker. It's gonna be lighter, or so yeah, it's not gonna be that. So what I gotta do is I gotta make that rub out a little bit of that and put that a little bit darker. I can add a little bit of green to the orange, or blue to the orange to make it green. And also, if it's red in there, it kind of turns into a brownish gray, so that's fine too. This area right here. I know it's kind of bright for a background, but is it's soft edged. It's blurred. It's not hard edges. And so that will keep it back there. So I just dipped into violet. I don't need violet. I need white and yellow. Because this whole thing right here is very light yellow. Just going in there with some nice bright yellow. And as you notice, this is darker, so I'm going to go in there with some thick paint. Thick paint if you don't want it to bleed. Remember, thick paint in a wet wash so it doesn't bleed. Yeah, I'm just gonna go in there. It's thick. It's thick, but it gives a harder edge so it doesn't run all over, but it's not a hard edge like you would do when you're doing on a dry surface. This is still all wet here. This is still all wet. On this side, we have a nice orange, fall colors, autumn colors. Up here in Duluth, there are some of the colors are already changing. There's some of the trees are already have some red and yellows. Not many of them, but they're starting. And so maybe next week by next week when I'm way up there, they may have already turned a little bit. I am excited to watch the painting for this beautiful time of year. Yeah, it's fun. I like using making trees not green because the green is not my favorite color. So the fact that I can use other colors besides green for the leaves is like wonderful. That's kind of I'm hoping when I get up there to do the plein air fest. I'm hoping that a lot of the changes of the trees have changed already. So this is wetting as we go along here. Top of these rocks are a little bit lighter, so I'll go around them. This area, I'm going to put a little bit of green in. And in my palette out for outdoors, I have a different palette I've been using, but I actually started using leaf green, and I got to get that into this palette, leaf green. It's a really nice green to make it very vibrant. It's like a yellow green. I've got to get that in my palette sooner or later here. Because it's hard to mix that bright a color, you know, with just the light, with especially with the how clean my palette is. A little bit tough to get that kind of colors in here. And again, see how everything is soft edge, smooth, or blurry, basically blurry. Soft edges make blurry looking washes, and so we want that. We want it to be blurry, push back. I don't want it to come forward. That's the background. If I have everything focused, everything's the same importance. And this way, you don't have just overlapping, because that's one of the dimensions is overlapping things, and that's fine. So now I'm still doing my lights. This is my light scenes. And so what I'm gonna do now is go in here with some lavender for the water, get some of the water. That's the light, right? The lightest thing in my picture here is the water. So I'm taking a little lavender and just gonna put that in here because I'm using a lot of yellow and red. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of reflections or the shadowing next to the water. The water itself, I'm just going to keep white. Just keep it white. You don't need to put color into the water. It's a white stream, and and then seeing through it because it's falling down and it's just going to stay white. I learned that through watching animated films by Disney. Just watch how the artists in Disney do their water and how they do the ripples and stuff. It's amazing because it's like they just keep everything that's water white and everything else around it then is colored. So it gives you a good reason to watch some Disney movies as well. Look at some animated Disney movies, especially because they use white, basically just white, to show their water and how to direct the eye with the water. It's pretty amazing. Those animators are pretty nice artists. They're pretty amazing artists that can do some really amazing stuff. I've always kind of looked at those animated things just for that. I actually watched Ratatouille about a couple weeks ago. Finally started getting Disney Plus, and so I thought, I haven't seen that in a while. I want to see how the town, like a Paris town, looks like, or inside a kitchen, and how they draw it, and it's pretty amazing. So here's the lights. Again, these are the shadows, light shadows on the water. And some of this should be all just kind of all a little bit lighter. Then right into the water down here, I'm just going to put a little bit of the light. The rocks themselves are all dark, and so I will put a middle tone and a light on them next. I will put them on there, but that's after I do, that's my big middle tones, my big darks, right? Middle tones and darks come next. Step two. Step one now is still working my lights and my colors. That's step one. And while I have these colors in my palette, I can reflect them into the water here a little bit. I know though in the picture right here, see the picture how all this bottom part right there is very dark. Ooh, that was this table. This dark is all just dark, right? And that's fine. You can do a little bit of that, but I'm going to reflect some of that color into that water too, because that way it makes it look more realistic. I know that when water is still, you see it, but there can be parts in here that it still reflects within the waves. So putting a little bit of that in there doesn't hurt it. And it'll be darker later. Again, I'm doing my lights. Now let's go into our middle tones. And middle tones on the texture of the rocks, you got to think. Always think texture. What kind of texture are you gonna put in those rocks? Are you gonna use a cellophane, salt? A lot of people spatter. There's so many different ways again of getting a different kind of texture in the rocks. But the first thing you do is start out with a middle tone. And I'm gonna start out with a little bit of the warmth, maybe more of a green, like a mossy top, which is what it looks like. There's moss on top of the rocks, so take a little bit of blue, a little bit of the quinacridone gold, mix myself a little bit of green, and I'm gonna wet this as I go along. I'm not gonna wet it all at once because I can just wet it as I go along. And that, if I wet it all, everything, then by the time I get there, it's gonna be dry anyways. But what I like to do is when you're doing this part, when you're wetting as you go along, just it keeps you from going all over. Also, like you can only work this spot right now because this is the only part that's wet. So that's how come I like to do it painting as you go along. Gosh, my beer. Keep on wanting to put my beer. Cheers, everybody. New Paddle Kolsch. Very good. It's a very good beer. For Leinenkugel, which is not like a really high-end beer, but it actually tastes pretty good. Again, a little bit of green moss on there, a little bit of warmth, some reds here, a little warmth in there. And as I'm going along, I'm wetting also, and so that I will try to figure out what kind of technique I'm going to use for the look of texture. Because rocks usually are kind of bumpy and textury. So I got to think of a way. Some people like to use pigment that has more granules in it, and that's another way of doing it to get um, granules in there. Spattering it later. Nice and colorful here. I'm just going to try to get lots of different colors. Let it bleed down. And this is my middle tone. Keeping my little lighter lights up here. There's like this little bit more pattern right there. And use the colors that you have in your palette. I am going to try to show you how to use one of these. I call these the ugly brush. This is just a bristle brush. You can get at Menards for like 50 cents or 99 cents. They're just a bristle brush, and these are really worn, and so they're worn. Some people take scissors and cut into it like this to get it a little bit more, not so perfect, because it's great for just dipping into some colors. And while it's wet here, see, I'm just dipping into colors and then just tapping down and getting texture. And just pushing down. Sounds like Bob Ross when he does it on his canvas. Happy little rocks. We'll do happy little rocks here. It's a little bit of purple, a bit of red, blue, purple, brown. See, I'm dipping in everything. I need some darks in here now, and I want to just grab some colors. I'll make these a little warm too. I said I'm gonna make this part cool, but so I can still do that with the water in this area right here. I can get in there with a little bit more blue, even some light blue. This is pretty dark, but it's going to dry to 20% lighter. So it looks dark right now, but that's not going to stay that dark. They also make a 1/4 inch like this, but I don't see them in the hardware store. So those you got to buy online, like on Amazon. Just type in bristle brush, bristle, bristle. What do they call these brushes? Oh, they call them. I don't remember it. This is before the day's over or the night's over. It's called. So that's pretty much my texture. See, it's wet, but some parts are really thick on my brush, and so those stay a little bit more than the other ones. And then I can also make a little bit of lines by just tapping it across it. Now over here, I don't want to wet it with that brush. Hey, Maura, welcome home. Hake brush. The hake brush is goat hair, and this is bristle, so not a hake brush. But you could probably do it with a hake brush too. But this is very hard bristles, and so they're a bristle brush, a chip brush. That's what I think some of them call them. They call them a chip brush, a chip with bristles. And I like the bristles to be really bad shape. The worse, the better they work. I know Bjorn Bernstrom uses it, and what he does is he cuts into the bristles. He cuts into the bristles or was that John Lovett? Maybe it's John Lovett that uses the bristle brush. One of those two artists uses a bristle brush and uses a 1/4 inch one. So here I'm wetting with colors. I do use my darks. I gotta watch out that I don't go over my white water because that's gotta stay nice and light and wet the paper. This I'm still gonna make greenery up here. And actually, I like to keep the top of the rocks light so that then they'll have the background darker. And so it just shows like the top of the rock. You're gonna make a little rock right there. What's this? This is edge of the rock. This is water coming down. And what's this? This is part of a rock back there. I can make that a little bit bluer. Here. And again, there's no texture in there yet, but you can wait a little bit for the texture. You don't have to get the texture in right away. You can just first wet it, then put all the pigment in, and then take a thicker pigment. Because again, the thicker pigment lays on top, and over here I could probably spatter and scatter. I can even just tap it like this with water. I think it's all up there though. So just tap them a little bit. And make sure I keep this area clean. It's not my studio. I can't go crazy. So over here. We have roots in the middle here. And I'm keeping the warmth right in here, kind of, and as I'm going away, I'm getting cooler. Again, that's to direct my eye. And we really haven't talked that much lately about color and how to use color in your composition, but I'm getting there. I'm just going first from the big areas to the smaller things because you can't get everything at once. It was the notan or the notan first, the black and white, get that part done. Now we're doing blurriness and hard edges to make that part work for your dimension. And then next we'll get the final, we get into colors and how to use the colors. And we may even do that thing where we do like only two colors and then we'll do three colors. We won't do a one color because well, we could do that too. We could do a one color. It's always fun to do a one color. Usually at the beginning of the year, that's what happens. I usually go in and start from the get-go, from the scratch. I give you some of this texture in here. Get some warm texture. I wonder what happens if you see now. This is dry paper. No, it's not wet at first. So I'm going to see what happens if I do that first and then apply the water into there. So it's just something different, so you yourself should be doing this too, trying different things. Just because I say to do it a certain way doesn't mean that you can't do it some other ways too and practice other things. Try, see how maybe if you tap it first and then wet it on top of there, maybe some parts you can keep that way. Look at that, it works actually pretty well. Yeah, I always just think, the way I teach is I try to teach as many different things. So doesn't mean that my one way that I do things is the right way. There's many different ways of doing things in art. So try different things, even though I say to do it a certain way. And the important stuff, yes, go with what I say. And but always try to break the rules a little bit once in a while. It'll just give it a nice look and maybe a different kind of look that will be part of your style. There's the rock. This would be a good time to throw salt in there now too. Salt is great for rocks, really. Sometimes you get those really nice textures in there. Here, I'll take some water and just plant some water on here. Look at this. This will be texture. Get some lighter colors like even white or yellow or pink and throw that in there. They'll separate a little bit. They'll separate things and make it. I like texture. I mean, there's a lot of texture in rocks. My teacher used to take, Irving Shapiro used to take a tissue paper, let it float on top and bring it up and then just let it be. Okay, I'm just looking for questions. So now we have the background. See how the background just goes back as it comes forward. It's coming forward, and look at this bright contrast we have here now. And this is our darks. That's our light. It's all working, right? So that's what you want to do. That's why I do the way I teach it that way. We start out with the big areas, and then we go from that to blurriness, and then to color, all in the name of trying to show you from beginning to end how I develop a painting. And I don't care where I do it outside, do it inside, do it in my studio, and what paper you're using. The design of a painting is always the same for me. I don't change that part. It could be a different medium, it could be different paper, different paints, maybe different medium of like pencil or acrylic or gouache. That part, when it comes to design, doesn't change. Yes, you need to know how your medium works and everything, and the paper works and stuff like that. But when it comes down to the how I design my work and how I look for paintings and what I'm looking for to paint, that doesn't change. That stays the same over and over again. That's the fundamentals. That's the fundamentals of how to paint. I learned it from Irving Shapiro. He learned it probably from some of his teacher. So that's what I'm trying to teach you. Now I got this nice little crevices going here to show that the water's running down here. But what you're seeing is the water breaking up. It breaks up and it kind of splits around a rock and then it goes down. And so you're looking through the water and it's not hitting there, and so you're seeing the rock behind the water. And water, like if you see a photograph where it's blurry, even this picture is blurry right here. That's not the way it looks in real nature. That's the camera slowing down the shutter speed, and so that it's making everything blurry there. And I don't want the water blurry because I want it to look hard. I want it to look like it's crashing down. And so I want hard edges. I don't want to blur that. This is my center of interest, so I definitely don't want to blur it too because it's my center of interest. So the water should look hard. Like it's coming down hard and it's hitting the rocks and it's making all that noise. And so that's the fun part about it. And my teacher was a master at this. Irving Shapiro, my mentor, he was the master at doing waterfalls. The guy, man, he could do a waterfall like nobody's business. So now I'm going, my rocks are pretty much there. I can still go in later on and get more texture. You can do dry texture. And so that's another way, dry brush across it. Hey, Sylvia from California. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for stopping by. Hit the like button and tell your friends to subscribe. Always helps me out. So now I'm just gonna look at the picture and see how right here it's a little bit darker, the waterfall. And so I'm just gonna make that a little bit darker, and I'm not gonna make it blurry like it is in the photo because it's not blurry there. That's a camera effect. The camera shutter speed is really slow, and then it blurs that because it's blurry. Like when you move your camera when you're taking a shot, it's blurry that way because everything else is the shutter speed is left open, and so it's making a shot of the rocks perfectly, but anything that's moving will look blurry, and that's how come they do that. Some people like that look where it's all blurry, but I don't like the look for a painting. It's okay for photograph. I like it to look like it's running down and really pounding on the rocks, and it looks more real too if you make it not blurry. You can make the ones in the background, of course, you would make those blurry if it's in the background, but not the ones in front here. And I look at the photo to see which direction the water is flowing, and then where it's darker behind something like here, right here, it's a little bit darker behind it here coming down. And then that's in front of it, sitting here. And anywhere it hits and splashes, it's all just white. Just keep it white. And everything of the water is white, but I'm shadowing the water because there's some of this water's in shadow. The light is not hitting it, but it's still white, but it's a shadow on top of the white. And so depending on how thin the wash is coming down, you can see behind it. Sometimes it looks really dark because it's just a thin wall of water, and so you're getting to look like the rocks behind it. You can see through it because it's like a glass. Then it's like a glass mirror, not a mirror, just a painted glass. And after a while, you get used to painting. Like, let's say waterfalls are your thing, and you really know how to do them well, or you do a lot of them. You start knowing exactly what to put on them because the rocks and how they fall, and the way your style is. Shapiro used to do these little round dots right in here that you can see through, and that was his signature waterfall. Some people make the lines. He made these little like round oval eggs, and that was his thing, and it would look just like a beautiful waterfall. And anytime I would do that, people would say, "Oh, you had Shapiro, right?" And yeah, definitely they know because that's Shapiro's style to put these little round dots to show the behind the rock, behind what you see behind the breaking up of the water, like these little dots I'm putting in there. That's a Shapiro trick. Irving Shapiro. He was the director of the American Academy of Art, and he's also the best watercolor teacher at the Academy. Okay, I'm doing this area a little bit more detail because this is my center of interest. This whole area here, everything in this area is center of interest. So just getting that in there. All right, let's put our dark and water in there right away. So the water is the color of the rocks up here because everything else is white down here. So just pick up the colors that you have on your palette that were from your rocks, and then just I make a lot of Z's. See, I'm just making a lot of Z's. Z, 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 Z. See the Z? And then of course maybe a little bit of orange and yellow. Oh, I gotta fill up my palette here. I haven't filled it up for a while. A little bit of red, orange. I'd love to see you try it in a different color scheme too. I'd love to see that. This got a little bit dark right there in the background, but that's okay. But it is blurry, so it's all soft edge, so it's blurry, so it still sits back, and that's good. And what I can do is I can make some more weeds right here and bushes or whatever in front of that and make it a little bit more contrasty so that even is more sits back. And so let's get again into our water here. Bring our water down. I'm going to take this rock, big rock here, a lot of Z's, a lot of Z's. Back and forth, back and forth. A little bit of orange. I really don't have much blue, dark blue in this area, or even green for the red. I'll put a little bit more of that in here for my dark darks. My detailed darks will come, and then I can put a little bit of that color in there too. My detailed darks will be important to get in there. No, I'm hoping to do a couple of these live, not live, but plein air this next week because they up here in the North Shore, you get a lot of beautiful waterfalls. And if you've ever been up in the northern Lake Superior on the North Shore, boy, if you want to see a lot of beautiful, beautiful, beautiful waterfalls, and there are many, 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 many. You wouldn't believe how many there are every half hour or in every half mile. I think there's one. Some are very much into the woods. You got to go in and find them, and some are really plainly. Um, there's books out there. There's so many books out there of the waterfalls here in northern Minnesota here on the North Shore. These little. This is all rippled. A lot of ripples in here because this is all moving fast down the river. So a bunch of now I'm getting smaller Z's, and actually this is my dark details, which I shouldn't really do yet. Let's go back to our small round brush and get our leaves up here. So I'll bring this down a little bit and I'll show you the sky. The sky now is just a nice light, very light tint of yellow. Looks perfect because it's just the light comes right in there. So my pattern of light and dark is almost all the way there. Now I'm doing my dark on top of the light. This is on my dark behind the light. This is the light, and then so this is opposite now. So we're just going to take and get some really dark darks. I'll just take what's in my palette here, and I'll just first do the branches I just made up here. I put it in there. I know there's no branches in the picture. The branches that there's a little one that comes over this way a little bit, but not big enough. And then there's ones coming down. And now how to do leaves. Boy, there's so many ways of doing leaves too. There's a thing called funny brush, and the funny brush is rubber bands. You can push that down with that. You can just take and actually paint them. What I like to do too, when I'm doing something like this, is I like to do ones that are the color of this background first, because those will be the ones that are behind, are farther back. Because now, because this is yellow, some of these leaves would look like they're behind the dark leaves because you're seeing that this is the background leaves because this is what the color is back there, right? So I put those in first, and I'm just basically dabbing my paintbrush down with a little dot pattern, and I kind of push my leaves around. And these are the light ones, and again, maybe I get some orange ones here, a little bit more orange. And I also like to like this dry brush it a little bit. Like this is not wet, this area. And so I like to take the side of my brush and just kind of take it across the paper in a dry brush fashion where you're picking up the texture of the paper by just going on the side here. And again, these are my lights. These are my light ones. And I'm just getting a little dry brush in here. Now let's get our dark ones on top of that. The dark ones are the ones that are in front. They're in front. Now they're green in the picture. And I have to tell you right now that this picture I created after I found one little part of a waterfall, and then in Photoshop, I had artificial intelligence AI make the rest of it for me because there was no trees in the background that were blurry. Matter of fact, there was a big woods back here, and there was no sky, and so I picked it out and told AI in Photoshop, give me some autumn trees in the background, and this is what it gave me. And this tree was here, this one right here, and so they just went around that. And so it's amazing what this Photoshop can do now for you. You kind of create your own picture by just asking it to do things for you. It took me a while though, because a couple of the scenes that it made for me, I didn't like. It was just like, no, that's not a good composition, or this is not right. And so I was kind of creating the look of the picture by just getting it, and it gives you three options when you do that in Photoshop. It gives you three options for the photo that is changing. And if you don't like it, you can say it again. You can keep on going, and it'll change it a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, or start from total scratch again because the words that you're using are not the right words to make it do what it's supposed to do. So now I'm getting in here, I'm just tapping and doing dark. And you notice how I do little blobs, little areas of blob so that it doesn't all, there you can see a little bit better. Let's hold it up a little bit. But I don't do dots everywhere. I do little areas where it's really, really thick because they kind of bunch up. The leaves kind of bunch up on the near the branch, and then you can see through the tree, and that's where you then would not have a leaf and maybe one or two leaves like this area right here can have one or two flight in there, but the rest are near the branch, and maybe there's a tree behind that or whatever. But so by this being dark, then it gives me a dark in the sky, brings that forward and helps out my composition pretty much. So Morris says, nice to know that you keep his memory alive with your paintings. Yeah, boy, everybody in Chicago that ever was in Chicago that took a watercolor class was taking from him. And many artists, if you ask them who that come from Chicago, they'll tell you that it was Irving Shapiro that pretty much he was, especially if they're watercolorists from Chicago, you took his class. Almost everybody that's a Chicago watercolorist took Irving Shapiro's class. Unfortunately, he passed away pretty young, and so, but before I became very close friends with his wife because his wife took my class because Irving Shapiro gave me his class when he got sick, and he came into the classroom one day and said, "Hey, David, I'm going to have my wife take your class," and it kind of floored me. I'm like, what? I mean, why would I teach your wife? You taught me everything I know. And he goes, well, someday when you grow up, you'll understand. And that was when I was in college, and I think I understand now. So it's just, yeah, he gave me his when he got sick, he had given me his classes, and so I've been teaching since 1983. Because I was teaching my first class in 1983 as an evening class for American Academy of Art, and I think I was just I had gotten out of school, so I was very close to still being a student. But I asked him though. I asked him because I wanted to be a teacher. I always loved teaching. Right from the get-go, I always thought that's what I would want to do. And he told me, David, get a real job first, a real art job, and then while you're doing that, you can substitute for my classes when I'm out on workshops. And that's what I did. That's how I kind of learned because he gave me the option of doing that, teaching when he was on his workshops, and I would just substitute teach. All right, a few more leaves here. A few little stories today. It's always fun to reminisce, right? I found Q-tip really makes some cool leaves too. Oh, Q-tip, that's a good idea. Oh, maybe that's a Tina thing. That's a Tina way of making. We'll call that the Tina way. We'll call that the Tina leaves process. Own it, own it. Oh, that's your way. Q-tips for leaves. That sounds awesome. If I had some right here, I would try it, but I don't. Let's see now. The only thing I have to do now is my details. Super details now. My details that are the small details. And I still gotta get this a little bit different because there's not a pattern where it goes back. So I'm gonna do this right here, like more of a green. I'm gonna take that, make that more of a green, and make this kind of hard edged right here, the edges. And then at the same time, when I'm doing that, it'll make this come forward, be part of this part of the painting, and then push this back. Now, if I do something like that and see how the green looks so odd because there's no green on anywhere else, you have to then put that green somewhere else in the painting. So think of it like, okay, now I have it there. How about maybe there can be a little bit on this side in the detail. Maybe there's some moss growing on the side of this rock, and then you have it. Then maybe a little bit of weeds right there, weeds, and over there a little bit, and maybe some of that in the tree too. Just a little bit of the green in the tree wouldn't hurt it, because they are green leaves. In the end, they are green leaves. Some didn't change yet. They have not changed yet here. Maybe what we're gonna do now is put a little bit. How much time we have here? Okay, we still have plenty of time. I'm gonna make this bush stand out a little bit more, and so I'm gonna darken this up back here a little bit, and make this part hard edge, and I'm just gonna bleed it into the softness of that, and just let that bleed in there. It's still detail. It's like my dark details. It pushes that forward, pushes that back, and then this still stays nice and soft edge. I'm not going to touch that area. If I want to touch this area, I have to spray it or do something to keep it soft edged. I don't want hard edges there because again, that'll bring it forward. A hard edge brings things forward. Maybe have a little pine tree right here. Why not? Just give it another dimension. It's all about soft and hard edges, and blurring makes things go back. Blurry makes things go out of focus, simplifies it. And watch this. I'm going to do something. Here's how to make something look soft, but when it's a hard edge. You take the contrast, so the sky is pretty much just yellow, right? It's yellow with white. But if I take a little bit of yellow, just darken it just slightly, and then put a tree back here, very light, then it looks soft. You can't even see it actually on the screen. I can see it. You can't even see that. Can you see that now? It's a little bit. I'm just going to put a couple trees in here that are very light, little pine trees that are way in a distance. Now they're hard edged, but because they're so light, they look soft edged. So it's just another little dimension that I could put in there. So two ways of making it go back. One is soft edge and one is just low contrast. Not much contrast, and that's part of the peacock. Now, if you remember in my one newsletter, Peacock, PECOC, you don't go back into archives. And somebody had asked me one time if they could get the archives of my thing, and it's on my website. Go to my website where you're signing up. Right there, there's an archive of every newsletter I've ever put out. And I think there may be in a place where you can search. Like if you just type in, you know, Peacock, and it'll come up. So this right here. There's the one tree right here in the distance. And now this is farther forward, and so I'm going to make this harder edged, a little bit darker, so it comes forward a little bit more. Put a pine tree right here. That way, also, it will show my rock, the edge of my rock, a little bit better. And when you do pine trees, sketch them a little bit. Go outside and sketch them, and not ones that are in your yard. Ones that are in a forest, because the ones in your yard have been trimmed and been cut, and the ones that are out in the wild in nature, they're not trimmed, and they have branches that are sticking out, and they're not looking great. But it looks more real if you make it so it looks like it's not perfect tree, like not a perfect pine tree where you stick A into A slot A and B and make it a Christmas tree. And there's so many different types of pine trees too that it's pretty interesting, especially up here. So one more trees over this area. I like to make this a little bit darker and maybe some greenery over here. A combination of a pine tree and a bush in front of it. You can do that too. It all doesn't have to be the same. Always think, how can you make things different? Here I'm going to scumble a little bit. Scumble meaning I'm just taking a dry brush and just going across the paper to get it look a little bit more textury. All right. What do you guys think? Is it done? Cindy says better than the picture. Oh yeah, we always want to make it better than the picture. Like I said, we're not photographers, so we were painters, and so we gotta make it look better than a photograph and make it look like a. You don't have to make it look like a photograph. You want to make it look like a painting, and that's where the washes come in and how you use your medium differently, scumbling or whatever. I think, oh, let's put some. Oh, let's use some white. I mean, I like using white. I'm gonna use some white little fleckles, and because there's a lot of sparkle in water. And so I like using white at the end when I have water, especially reflections and stuff. It really kind of looks neat. So I'm using pure white, and I'm just going to go in here and do some Z's. Look at this, little Z's and little dots. There's a lot of times little dots here and there. And I think I'm going to start doing it where I have two different whites, one white for mixing and one white for just plain, because that way I don't have to constantly waste a lot of white because I go in there and I just dip my towel in there to get it back to white. Because when I mix it, it gets really dirty and tinted and muted and diluted with the color that I put on top of it. You can also put a little water running down the edge of the rock because it hits there and sometimes it just kind of goes and it comes down the rock. Again, if you're in like a certain club, art club, watercolor club that doesn't allow opaque, don't do this because they'll not accept your painting because this is a not traditional way of using white. You don't use white in the watercolor. That's the only thing that Shapiro right now is rolling in his grave that I'm using white. That's the only thing. All right, guys, I think this is pretty much it. Let me go take the tape off and see. So I hope you get the idea about blurring your photos and figuring out the composition. And a lot of times, if there's an area in your work that you know how to do with because it's just too tight, blur it, blur the background. I don't care if it's buildings or boats or it can be blurred to make everything simplifying it, simplify the whole area. Can get this tape off. You can simplify the whole area, and that way it just makes it a big area. You don't have to even make it soft. You don't even have to make it soft edge. Blurring sometimes can just be light value contrast. You don't have to make it every time. Get this water out of the way. It's still a little wet, you can see from the light above. But there you have it, guys. I'm not going focus. Is it in focus? See with the light reflecting on there. All right, guys. Next week we do not have a paint along. Thursday is the big opening of the Plein Air Fest, and so there will be no paint along next week. I will maybe post a picture that if you want to try it, but no paint along next Thursday. The following week there will be one. I think I'm going after this. After I come back from Grand Marais, Minnesota, I'll be heading down to Springfield, Illinois, to do a workshop in Springfield, Illinois, which is watercolor, not gouache. The ones I'm doing now at Dillman's, actually after this week, I'm actually going to Dillman's. Actually, I forgot to say that. I'm going to Dillman's, which is in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, and there are still spots available there too, if you'd like to join me there. That is watercolor and gouache together. Meaning gouache, it could be like the white that we put in here, or this little bit of opaqueness in there. That could be like that. All right. See any last questions? All right. We'll see you guys soon and talk to you soon. Cheers and have a great, great rest of the week. Bye bye.